35 minutes past 7 o'clock on 99 FM. It's time for us to go on our daily grind, that royal hustle. As you do know, that Tuesdays are dedicated to Namibian royal hustlers. Today, it's a celebration of the pen and the paper. A journalist by profession, Tangeni Amupadhi is the editor-in-chief of the Namibian newspaper. He previously worked at the Namibia Press Agency, South Africa's Mail and Guardian newspaper, and is a published author. In 2004, he helped set up Inside Namibia and worked as the magazine's editor until 2011. That's when he joined the Namibian. Tangeni is a University of Maryland alumni where he studied as a Fulbright scholar. He was also a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University. Tangeni, good morning and thank you very much for joining me here today.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much for having me.
I think it's one of the voices that people are really looking to, especially in Namibia, to sort of speak to us and tell our stories. But today we want to hear your story, your royal hustle, how you ended up in the spaces that you found yourself in. So let's start with the childhood. What kind of child were you growing up as a young boy?
Well, how do I put that? I consider myself privileged. I had a privileged childhood. And that is simply by the standards of my peers. I'm a village and town boy, village and city boy. So grew up in the village, was raised first by my parents, then my grandma. But I consider myself privileged because at the time where I was growing up, and I think even some of my friends who I know today could attest to that. I was raised by parents who went to college. So it wasn't that common in the village areas.
Who had an education themselves as well.
Exactly. So there was quite a lot of emphasis in my family that as children must go to school, like at least have basic education.
Yeah.
When other boys were forced to go and raise or look after cattle and goats, my parents, my grandparents insisted I must go to school.
Yeah. Open the books.
So for me, that's what I call privilege.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the biggest dreams while paging through those books and reading all these stories from around the world when you were growing up. What were some of the biggest dreams and ambitions you had for yourself?
Definitely to go out and see the world.
Yeah.
But believe you me, since I was a kid, and maybe it's because of my mom dying early while giving birth, so I remember as early as pre-primary school, that's another privilege which other kids didn't have. As early as pre-primary school and primary school, I was dreaming of becoming a medical doctor. Not a truck driver and all those other exciting stuff that I think some of my friends and peers were into at the time. So medical doctor was my big dream. In fact, I remember promising my father, I will be his doctor one day.
I must say. Talking about your elders, and you mentioned earlier that your parents raised you as well as your grandparents. What kind of lessons, life lessons, did they teach you that you carry with you throughout your life and apply?
Wow, I think to encapsulate it is be productive. Like, it's an expression actually which I used to hear a lot from especially my grandma, Shana Kuja or Shana Kuronga, which means you cannot want to eat if you have not worked. You have to work for what you want, or at least you have to work to partake in the eating. And I don't think we should be confused with nowadays this our turn to eat kind of approach where people actually want to cream at the expense of the general public, but really that We work. I remember us waking up as early as 3 a.m. to plow the fields, like with donkeys and oxen at Onakulo village. So you are not excused just because you are a child of 5, 6 years old. You have to get out there and do the work.
And at the same time, already discipline is being instilled, already respecting the earth and working it, you're already being taught of it.
You have to appreciate that
Yeah.
whatever you get comes from somewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
Nothing comes from for free or at the back of somebody else's sweat.
And you must do your part.
You
That's right.
must do your part.
Yeah. Let's talk side hustles. And now I can imagine that you were in the books all the time from a young age. Was there a chance to ever try maybe a little work on the side, something completely out of your comfort zone, or just a side hustle, like a Zula on the, huh?
The direct answer is no. It's a strange one, but
Yeah.
a cousin of mine, my brother basically, who we grew up together, used to dodge from home, from the village, goes to Oluno, Ondangwa, and hustle stuff from the South African soldiers or South African military, get beef, bully beef, and biscuits, and those Kool-Aid, sweet-aid kind of powdered mixed drink mixtures. But for me, I think if at all I can mention something I can call a hustle, and I'm actually ashamed to say, I used to steal my parents from my mother's kapana.
Okay,
You
thank
know,
you.
and exchange and sell a bit with my friends at school. That's as far as
Well, I was actually
my
referring
hustling.
I was actually talking about the legal. I was talking about a real. But okay.
No, unlike my brother, who my,
Oh my goodness.
youngest brother who sold,
Yes.
what is it, airtime.
Yes.
No, my parents were too strict actually to allow us to
Spend
hustle.
extra time
Not
doing-
even
yes.
spend extra time. It's like you would be asked to explain, where did you get this 1 cent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
but you was not a working child.
that's-
You was going to school.
That's not your focus.
Yeah, it's not where you are. Yes,
Right.
no, completely understandable. Now, tell us about that one thing that you do daily to improve your life, whether it's read a book, or
Yeah, I guess it's now so obvious that I just have to read. But something that I, especially over the past 3-4 years, it's more of psychological development. They call it adult learning. It's not adult literacy, but the older you grow, the less your capacity for learning. So one's mind always needs to be opened up by facing stuff that you don't normally do. So I tend to deepen self awareness subjects quite a lot.
and every day you can certainly learn something new. Even if you're feeling you're an adult, there's an opportunity to just even open something that you've never opened before.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
learn something brand new. How do you think traditional media in Namibia will survive current challenges that include the digitalization as well as the loss of advertising revenue in so many platforms that we might experience in future?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I run an organization that's in media, and we are probably the traditional media, if we can call it such. Newspapers are really declining and at a very fast pace. But I think everybody knows it's mostly newspaper that produce a lot of the content that you find across all other mediums, even social media. Big stories of the day probably exposed first of all in newspapers. So that's quite a contradiction, where the newspapers bring out so much that then everybody gets to feed on, yet starved because the audience are now so far dispersed and it's not so easy to reach them. So we just have to adapt, and hopefully the public appreciate the work that's been put in, and that the public should pay to get that information to different platforms where they are.
Yeah, in order to also support the institutions.
Otherwise, I mean, apart from just supporting the institutions, supporting the quest for knowledge.
Yes.
There's nothing, I always say, there's nothing that comes before information. Without information, we won't get anywhere.
Fake news is intruding into our hands and our faces every day now on a daily pace. And I was just going to mention that the newspaper is also some of the most accurate news that you can find in the countries. How do you think media professionals can do, and how can they rebuild in order to gain that trust again from the audience, in order to gain that trust again from people who open up and read newspapers?
I think the public will always be brought back to understand that there are certain mediums that are too loose, too fast. I mean, you have Facebook, it's a massive monstrosity of an organization, yet they will never guarantee you the information that they get is accurate. But a lot of other traditional media do that, as small as they are. And I think it's up to us as journalists to keep providing correct information. When we get it wrong, make sure we tell the public we got it wrong. After all, that's just how life is. If you mess up, you clean up. And we know messing up is part of life. As whatever work you do, whatever life you are in, it's all about cleaning up, owning up to your mistakes, and I think that will also help a lot in engendering trust.
World Press Freedom Day is being celebrated in the land of the brave this year, and the future after that, I mean, there's so many opportunities for Namibian journalists, for Namibian media houses to be able to interact with the world and create stories that will transcend borders. Tell us what the future looks like for you, for media in Namibia, or the future of Namibia in general, and what you are most hopeful for.
Firstly, we have to be proud as Namibians. World Press Freedom Day is actually an offshoot of something that was done in Namibia, culminated into the Windhoek Declaration, basically about plurality of the media and freedom of the press, freedom of expression. So it's something that we should really cherish and keep pushing forward. So I think the future is very much hopeful. I look around as there are countries that would boast to be free, our neighbors Botswana, but I think Namibia has got an even freer press. So generally, the future of the media in Namibia is in good hands.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Tangeni. It was interesting to hear about your childhood and growing up and how you apply your lessons that you've learned to life today, and also the work that you do for Namibia. You've been at the Namibian for 10 years now.
Don't remind me,
I'm
please.
just
don't tell people.
Okay.
Now they say I've overstayed my welcome.
Okay, all right.
And we are just rebuilding.
But if it's not broken, then well, should we fix it, right? But no, we'll look into it in the future, of course, and I'm sure there will be so many more opportunities for growth for the newspaper itself. And yes, we keep reading and we keep buying and supporting, and thank you for keep bringing us the accurate news, I believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was the voice of the editor-in-chief of the Namibian newspaper, previously worked at the Namibia Press Agency, as well as South Africa's Mail and Guardian, but now also part of the bigger picture in media here in the land of the